generally takes about 2 seconds. Okay, we will get started. Call the meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Call order to meeting the Commissioners' Weekly Finance Meeting today, June 22, pointed out at 1:30, having arrived. We'll begin with our period of public comment. Do we have anyone online, or there's no one in the room who wishes to address the Board of Commissioners? So we'll move right along to our business items. We have item 3 is the approval of the minutes from our meeting of June 15th. Do we have a motion?
Yes, move to approve the minutes of June 15th.
Okay, we have. I will second that. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. That will move us on to our business items. Topics of discussion under item 4 in the agenda. We'll start off with Housing and Redevelopment Authority. This is our regular update. Mary couldn't give us today, Executive Director. And she's chair of our welcome.
Thank you. So again, agency overview, but basically responsible for housing and redevelopment in Cumberland County, but we also cover Perry County when it comes to the Housing Choice Voucher program. So Housing Choice Voucher is what you would think of as Section 8, where we subsidize a portion of a person's rent. The county between Perry and Cumberland are allocated a little over 1,300 vouchers. We right now have 1,181 out on the street, so being utilized. That number went down from last month. We're continuing to see a decline because people just cannot find units that meet the affordability. So we're doing a couple of things. One, we raised our payment standard. So that means we can go on the West Shore, particularly 100% of what's allowable. We've done for Carlisle 80%. So we're trying to raise it to sort of meet at least what the market is at. So that's one area we're working on. We're increasing pools, so we're pulling people off the list in a significant amount. So we're hoping that the more people who respond, the more we can get them vouchers and they can go out and continue to find housing. And then we're going, and I'll talk about this later, we're conducting some landlord outreach to just sort of make them more aware, see if there's a willingness to participate. Right now we do have over 500 landlords that do accept vouchers throughout both counties, which is a great number. And then our waiting list has gone up. So we're at 2,731 people, comparably to March. So that has increased. And then we spent in May about almost close to $600,000 in the subsidy. So that comes directly from HUD through the county to us. So again, a person is given 60 days with 2 30-day extensions to find units. So once you get us all your information, you're pulled off the list, you get us everything you need. We give you 60 days once that voucher is in hand to go find a unit, and then we give you 2 30-day extensions. So in general, we've been seeing some progress, but people have been using the extensions. For public housing, all the county's public housing is located here in the borough of Carlisle. So that is housing that is owned by the Housing Authority through HUD. And that's about 109 units, and our waiting list is 1,058 families. Let's go with that.
Before you go on, so I want to come back to this one point,
Sure.
because you briefed us on it before, and that is the landlord situation. So it seems that, at the heart of the matter, we have to have landlords participating.
We do, yes.
Otherwise, you don't have units.
Exactly.
So that's the root issue. So I think what you briefed us on before, correct me if I'm wrong, is that increasingly some previous landlords were opting out.
Yes.
So have we done any surveying to find reasons for that, and has the rate of that changed at all?
I can't speak to the rate of it. We've had some new landlords participating, so we're making a very conscious effort to do some outreach, and I'll go into what that all looks like. But it's, the public sector has to work in line with the private sector. You have to work with them, and so what we've just been seeing is that with COVID, a lot of we rent to a lot of mom and pop landlords. They're starting to sell their properties, and so we're seeing this turnaround, and a lot of units are going far above what we can possibly offer, to a person for a subsidy. So that's where we're at. So we're doing a lot of outreach that'll be coming up, and thank yous and different things, different other ways to help subsidize the landlord's cost besides just the rent.
So the opting out, you believe, is more financially motivated than.
I think it is. I think we're seeing the financial motivation. I do know there are some cases where we've heard of a few bad eggs, which even
You always have that.
Yeah, so we're going to try to help on that side too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. When it comes to the emergency rental assistance program, so we ended this in April of 2022, April 1st, for new applications. If you have your application in, we're still willing to fund it and provide continued assistance. The issue just became a lot of other counties have also started to sunset this new applications because there's been an increase in fraudulent applications. This program started March of 2020, so there's been 2021, I should say, and there's been a person is given about 18 months of assistance. So from that point on, it's starting to just become harder to meet all the qualifications of the program. So we've stopped accepting new applications. We returned all of the. So there was 2 amounts given to the county. One was through the federal government directly. One was through the state. The county and our office opted to return all of the PA dollars for that first round. We just weren't able to spend them. There's bigger need out there in the state. So we returned those to DHS. And the federal government just came out with, for this ERAP 1, those funds, we cannot expend them past September of 2022. So the number here is we have about 753,000 less as of May 31st. That's now down, I believe, to a little under 500,000. So we are spending this money very rapidly. There's a second amount of money that was called ERAP 2 that the county received. This money goes out until 2024. It's going to become challenging to spend this amount since everyone's capped at 18 months. So we're already seeing people have hit their cap, which isn't a problem at this point. If we can hold people for 18 months, that's wonderful. But our goal was to make sure, 1, we're trying to limit fraudulent applications, but 2, to make sure we had enough to fund the people who were already receiving assistance. So that is where we are at with that. So we have also spent pretty readily through our ERAP 2 funding. So continuing to see demand, but it's starting to dwindle as people are hitting that 18 months marks. For community development, so the county just was notified for their community development block grant program for 2022. They were receiving a little over 1.2 million. So the applications have been received in our office. They're putting together an action plan with some recommendations of funding. There were some really strong applications, and as always, CDBG is incredibly difficult. You get a lot of applications and you're capped in certain categories. So you're only capped at so much for public service, so much for blight, so much for economic development. You're capped in all these different areas. So it's a numbers game to make sure you can assist all the individuals you can in a timely manner. So those will be coming, that action plan with all of the recommendations will be coming to the county commissioners in July. Chris Rafferty and his team are working on that. The county received for their home program $595,520. So we're implementing a new review process for this actually as of tonight. So we thought it would be best to utilize our Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board, the county's board. They are a very active group of people, and we thought it would be nice for them to weigh in, have developers present on their requests, because we have 3 home requests in for $1.4 million plus. So we'd like for this board to help us look at those projects and determine some best ways, because again, 1.4 million versus the around 600,000 the county's receiving, there's going to be some gaps, and it's just a matter of working on with those developers to see what the gap really is. Those funds can be utilized for doing first-time home buyer, like single-family homes, rehabbing affordable units, rehabbing affordable housing, building new affordable housing. So home is a very flexible program, and hopefully the federal government will send more to the counties. I know they bolstered that budget, but who knows? It takes a while to come downhill. So our Cumberland County Housing Rehab Program. So we have sort of shimmied around some funding that wasn't being spent with CDBG by certain people. And so we determined, and we have a lot of program income. So we decided to add more to this program since we had individuals on the waiting list. So we've been able to take care of everyone on the county's waiting list. And as new applications come in, we have additional funding now we can allocate to that. The first time homebuyer program right now, through June, we have 97 individuals participating, and that number continues to increase. So last year it was $119,000 that we had to assist people with down payment closing costs. They have to go through the first time homebuyer program to be eligible for that. We have a housing counselor on staff right now, and she just started doing this last year. But this year through June, she's up to 29 individuals counseled. It's a big initiative through HUD and PHFA. So that is completely separate from that first time home buyer. You can just show up and she can work with you. So that's been going very well. We've sort of freed up her time a little bit to work on that further. Blighted property redevelopment. So last year, I revised the Blighted Property Board's procedures to expedite it as fast as government can expedite something. Right now, we have 6 properties that are in process, and I'm slowly getting more municipalities to start submitting. But we've had 2 properties voluntarily cleaned up by owners in Silver Spring Township, which is great. They received the notices, they went about their business and cleaned them up. So we didn't really have to do much more. That's the whole point. It's really to try and encourage, as a final step, a property owner to clean up their property. One property is currently working through demolition. That owner came and was very forthcoming with the board and is working well with the township. And it's just it's a tough property. So he's working through that. And then we have 3 slated for acquisition, meaning they have gone through the full process. There are some nuances to it. Funding is one, and of course, eminent domain is a long process. And so we just want to make sure ducks are in a row. Don't want any real surprises. And then the county's demolition fund. So the application and policy is available on our website. 1 application has been awarded. 2 are currently being processed. I have spoken to a few municipalities, and it looks like more are coming on board. But this is, if you go over 25,000 for this particular fund, it will be prevailing wage. Make sure they are aware of that. And we do have our labor compliance person working with a few applicants. So with blight funding, right now I have about 150,000 in a sort of revolving loan that we can use to acquire these. In addition, and rehab them, there's about $68,000 in CDBG funding to acquire blighted properties. So, and that's capped every year. So you can only use CDBG a certain percentage to go after blight. And so here's where I'm kind of getting into what we're doing with landlords. So we started something called the Housing Choice Voucher Coalition. And the idea is all of our landlords, so any landlord participating currently in Section 8 is offered to be part of this. There's nothing, it's just a title, but we're going to be doing quarterly landlord meetings to discuss policies. They can voice their concerns, they can meet their housing rep that they talk to all the time. We're going to do an email only for them, just with some tips and anything we think of. So our marketing person really wants a Facebook group, so have at it. We'll offer some connections with conflict mediation and eviction prevention. We're doing more informational sessions and webinars, so when they do need our support, we can be there as an agency. For new landlords, there's a $1,000 bonus. We are also now, for the first time, offering property damage and vacancy reimbursement payments. That was originally, we talked about doing it for new owners, but we're finding is if you are willing, after a vacancy to bring in another Section 8 tenant, we will give you a little extra compensation for that. And we want to go above what the security deposit is. So if someone has damaged a property beyond the security deposit, we'll step into a certain amount, but we will come in and help because we just know it's sometimes really difficult. And again, with Section 8, you're guaranteed the rent payment. So if their income goes down, we'll cover the rest of their rent. So it's never, the landlord is never without. And again, I stress you can evict. It's absolutely possible. to evict a tenant in Section 8 if they don't follow your rules and your lease, evict them. We're currently working on a new website, so that started last week, and we're hitting the ground running. So that should be done by the end of 2022. So that will be more user friendly. We're just trying to be able to meet the needs of our very broad audience. And then some office improvements. Our building is quite old, and everybody knows the joke, and I get it. But we are looking at getting a handicap space and working with the borough in front, because it is kind of, we're right next to Sadler, and it's a very tight space. Getting up to our second floor is challenging sometimes, so we wanted a space in front for everyone, so we'll pay for that. We're going to do some new flooring upstairs, and again, just sort of make more accessibility within the office. I've run out of office space, so we're expanding a bit upstairs and trying to work to meet community development's needs. So they're out of space in their office. One thing that we have invested in is required staff training. So HUD's rules change quite frequently, and sometimes people just kind of forget how to maybe do a rent calculation, or they've thought about they do it the same way all the time. So we've joined an online training consortium where now staff are required to take specific trainings each year, but also their directors can work with them on what they think is needed. So this way everyone has access and everybody can be on the same page and aware of new regulations. Sometimes you just go about your job and you forget that something might have changed. We did put out an RFP for engineering services. We also have an RFP out for painting, janitorial, landscaping, and some roof replacements. The best investment I made was the person who does compliance and procurement. We have a significant amount of improvements to do in public housing. I think there's a lot that can be done. And of course, you want to go through the true RFP process. So you need an engineer to provide you with the proper specs and anything of that nature. And painting and janitorial over public housing will help to get units back online rather quickly, and same with landscaping. So I can better use my maintenance staff sort of all over the place. And then of course, public housing needs a couple of roof replacements. So, and one thing I didn't mention was the land bank. So the county does have a land bank right now. There's no money with the land bank. So the process is there, but there's no money to acquire. But I did talk to the tax office, and we've been in discussions about what agreements would look like and how I would go about through the judicial sale process and what would need to be in place with them. So I'll be in touch with them and Keith, Stacy, to work through some of those things.
Not that we need more applicants, but is that an eligible ARPA possibility? Some seed money for?
Possibly, and I think that was something, Mary, that you had mentioned as a possible.
I assume you probably had considered that if there was a decision. Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, I know Altoona put some money into theirs and some of the other people have done that, but so I'll put that in. But that's so where we currently are. I didn't want to go too in depth about all the other things. But
One question now, and I should know this, but I just want to be clear. So when you refer to public housing, are you referring to the public owned housing,
Yes,
not
yes.
the rental units that are privately?
Right.
Okay.
So
It's a specific term, not a generic.
Right. So there's the vouchers that can go anywhere to any private landlord or to a nonprofit landlord. And then there's the physical public housing out here in the borough.
One other question I saw is now the website that you're contracting, what kind of information, is that something you have existing and you're upgrading, or is that a new?
We have, right, it's going to be a whole new version of what we have. What I found is ours is just not user friendly for particularly our population.
So it's aimed at end users or
End
landlords?
users. Aimed at all sorts of end users. So we will have information for landlords. Everything we have right now is varied. So unless you're pretty savvy with sort of navigating a website, you can't really find it. I want to be more predominant with, if you need housing, here it is, here's the button, make it very clear. So we just need a much more user-friendly website, and things change. You require all kinds of things have changed over time. So we need a brand new.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
That is our current situation. Can I answer any other questions?
Very useful.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. nice. There we go. So,
Run before it rains on me.
You might wanna-
Bravery. I know, right? Yeah. All right, bye, everybody. Thank you. Starting to look pretty ominous out there.
Okay, whatever happened, we used to have like a guest umbrella thing out of it.
Well, I was just gonna say, I do have one, but I think she'll make it.
We had a thing at the entrance that was like,
That's nice.
it's going back a ways. Anyhow, with that, okay, we'll move on to our second topic of discussion. This is the quarterly update regarding the county library system. Carolyn Blacksley, Swip from Gosler, Voucher,
Jeff for support. No, he's,
moral
he's,
support.
no, he's definitely part of
I'm here
big
for
part
the
of the
show.
process.
Alright.
Well, thank you for having us today. This is my second of 4 reports this quarter to just keep you up to date on where we are with the projects. And I think I'll continue to use this format if this works for you. We've got the goals on a green box on the left-hand side, and then each of the projects outlined on both sides of the paper. So just to jump right into with these projects, what we've done is we've appointed 5 different team leaders. So we've teams established for each one, and they're a makeup of people from my office, people from member libraries that are able to be active. The 2 on the front, office productivity and cybersecurity, are definitely spearheaded by my computer services staff. One by Eric Klein and one by Barbara Leach. And then the ones on the back are spearheaded by representatives from Frederickson, Bosler, and Simpson libraries. And Jeff is doing the community data one, so we really thank him for that. But as I said, he and others are actively involved in all of the projects. Many of the projects. So just to give you some of the highlights, you can read it word for word if you want to, but I'm just under office productivity. Some of the highlights: we've established our domain, we've migrated our email addresses, we've introduced everybody to their Outlook, whether it's desktop or web Outlook that they're using. We have organized everything. We've brought over all of the mailing lists and calendars that were on the county's Outlook for us. Eventually, we will get those migrated to Teams, but I'll talk about why we're not there yet. We have some of our administrative staff doing training on SharePoint, Teams, and other products that are part of the Microsoft 365 suite. But we are having troubles with our sync issues, and what that means essentially is that all of our old accounts, all of our new accounts are fine, but our old accounts, people like Jeff and I, we can't get the Windows account to match with the Microsoft 365 account. And we're working with a consultant, a professional at this. We've also consulted a bit with IMTO. We meet with IMTO monthly, actually, on this project. And so they gave us some really good advice at the last meeting, but it hasn't manifested into anything. We've tried some of those avenues and still not there, but we're getting closer, they think, and so we should be up and running soon, we hope, with the full Microsoft 365 suite. And part of that will include moving our intranet, which is right now on a Drupal website, moving that onto SharePoint. So we're going to move that's the intention anyways, to move the whole intranet over so our staff will access everything in one place. And we have very well and long established teams. So the Teams format really works, we think will work well for us from what we've seen in our trainings. Under cybersecurity, we've done quite a few things. That first we did our PCI compliance reports, and then we obtained a risk assessment from a company called Coalition, and we were thrilled to see that we were 8 points better than our peer groups. That's out of 100 points, but they had a little scale, and green to red, and we were on the green side. We had very few problems with security on our network and all of our peripherals. So that was exciting to see from their point of view. We are now going through that report and identifying where they did say this was a security hole, what made that a security hole? And some of them are required, like to have certain types of software open, working, you have to have ports open, and so they just identify that's a risk. They also provided for us the financial risk, which was under $200,000 a year was their assessment if all things went wrong. So that was good to read. Of course, that's I think a best case scenario. So we've been doing that. We've also been examining some tools and obtain the quotes, but we've decided not to purchase at this point in-depth testing and monitoring packages. So we may purchase that in the future. They're pretty expensive, and so one would be, do we have the funding to cover them? And two, is it really worth it if now that we've learned that we're not as high a risk as we previously thought we might be? But one of the tools you may have heard of is called Foresight. It's a pretty popular tool, and so that's been one of the ones we've enjoyed looking at the most. But we've kind of put that part of the project on hold while we explore insurance options, because that's something we really want to get in place here pretty soon, is cyber insurance. And so we're getting 2 quotes. We have 1 quote and we're getting a second for cyber insurance. And one of the things we need to work out is, how does our insurance affect our member libraries? Are they included in that, or do they each need to get their own? So we're working out those little bugs. But again, in our partnership with IMTO, working with them, meeting monthly with them, we learned about a couple of things that we've signed up for that may be familiar to you. The Multi-State Information Analysis Center, I believe it's called MSISAC. We've gotten membership to that, and they help monitor for government threats to network security issues. The CoFence Fish Me product that we all love and hate. We lost that access to that. I don't know if you all used it in the commissioner's office, but employees had it, and we really liked it. It's a great way to simulate current threats, phishing, and other types of email user behavior. And it's also a good way for your staff to report problems. And then we are drafting an incident response plan and a PCI security policy. Those are the other 2 things that we're currently working on. To do the incident response plan, we finally just decided last week we need to start just meeting 1 week at a time, every week for a set period of time, and just keep chewing away at that. So, so that will be done hopefully by the end of the summer. In terms of our other 3 groups on the back of the page,
Before we move on,
Oh, yeah,
I just
go
have
ahead.
1 or 2 questions. So the incident response plan, and that is to things like.
So we basically, it helps us identify, so that we have written down all the types of things that could be hit by a cybersecurity threat, and then who is in charge of taking care of that, what numbers do we need to call.
Okay.
So we can just pick that up and say,
All right, so
this is your baby and you need to call this person and get this taken care of immediately.
okay. The
Or
only
this
other
needs to be
question.
shut down.
Yeah, the only other question is regarding the insurance options. You mentioned about the $200,000 is your vulnerability liability. So is that, and then you mentioned about getting the quotes and needing to sort out whether it's system-wide or member library or whatever.
Right.
Those 2 things seem like they should be linked. So I would imagine the $200K in vulnerability is playing into the insurance negotiation.
Right, that report will goes to any insurance company that we apply with.
Does the $200K apply just to the system, or does that include member libraries?
That's really applies, I believe, to all system member libraries, because they were looking at every part of our network, and we're one network. So we're pretty certain it's going, and our insurance partners are also saying they're pretty sure it's going to be one policy, and that will cover the network. There may be other types of things that won't be covered. For instance, if a library would download their entire donor database information, take that home on a thumb drive and lose it, that would not be related to our network. That would be related to their practices, and they'd be liable for that. But if our donor database got hacked into, that would be covered under our insurance. And actually, probably first we hit up the vendor, but
Sure.
but yeah.
Donor database.
Yeah. So I suspect that's how this is going to play out, is that anything connected to our network, whether in a library or in the library system headquarters, or in the cloud for that matter, will be covered by our insurance. But that's information we'll learn soon. Any other questions about cybersecurity? Cloud migration. Well, the other side, these are more human services things. I just label them partnerships, community data, and schools. The partnerships group is probably the slowest to take off. We have a leader that we're stalled by finding somebody to lead that group. So we've got Lori Lose from Frederickson leading it. I did make contact at the beginning of February with a couple of different county departments who expressed a willingness to partner with us on initiatives, and even contacted me about some things that we could be doing together. So we've started with that list, and we developed a plan to approach each department head listed there with some prescribed questions for the interviewers. And so that should be starting in July. And from that, I'm just going to skip down to the bottom bullet. From that, we want to plan some lunch and learn style events with those department heads or their designees, someone who could come and talk to us about their organization. But our real goal is to find out, what can we do for you and what can you do for us? In terms of, for instance, every child intervention, I'd love for them to say, does your child use the library? Are they familiar with the literacy activities at the library? So that's just an example, but there are many things. I just sat here and listened to Housing and Redevelopment and wrote down an idea when she said about I write that down, the conflict mediation. Where do they do that? Does everybody have to always come to Carlisle? What if it happens in Shippensburg? Do they have a place? And could the library be that place to help them out? So contacting agencies, finding out how we can be helpful to them, and then starting some of those initiatives. One of the phone calls that I got in response to my outreach was from Jack Carroll about naloxone, and he's got this Nalox box program. And our intention is to hopefully have as many libraries involved in that as possible. The Commonwealth Libraries is also pushing us to do that. So we're getting it from the county and from the Department of Education. And to that end, Bosler actually already reached out to the RAISE project, got their staff trained, and they are also hosting monthly meetings for the public to learn about naloxone. We've been getting a lot of information. I'm sure everybody is appreciating Ashley Rom's enthusiasm with the adult reentry program. And there have been so many good nuggets from her program that I've been sending to the library saying, this is a partnership we could form. In fact, the one video, if you watched it, they did a roundtable discussion of people who were recently released from prison and what they did to get themselves involved in the community. And so many of them mentioned, I needed to learn about technology. There was one woman who said, I read every book I could get my hands on. And I heard these things, and we need to be part of this. We need to be part of this reentry, for example. So we're identifying those and hopefully, get some good partnerships on board within the next 2 quarters. Community data has been, and this is the one that Jeff's in charge of, that has been taking off, and yet again feeling a little stalled just because census data isn't as available as we thought it was going to be this year. Everywhere we turn, we're finding out that the decennial data is not going to be available until May 2023. So we will be we'll have a slowdown because of that, but we are using the American Community Survey data that's available through the census, and also identifying other forms of data that we can be using, because our primary goal here is to work with this data to match services to the data, to look at the data and figure out what services could we, and will we start offering. So existing and also things that we'll plan for the future. We are interweaving those sources of the data to make sure that our decisions are meaningful, purposeful, and of good service to the community. So one of the things that we did was we contacted, when we were puzzled by the data we were finding in the classes we were taking, we contacted Kirk Stoner, and Jeff and I had a great meeting with him, far more than he probably needed to tell us, but we were eating it all up. And so he walked us through a lot of things. The other thing that we did was uncovered some really great demographic data that had been done by the Pennsylvania State Data Center for the Pennsylvania Department of Education Commonwealth Libraries. And so I've contacted them. We have a plan to recontact after, he said, contact me after July 4. So he's on my calendar for July 6. To contact and hopefully get help with recreating the data sets that they did, because those were very specific to our library service areas. One of the problems we have is it's easier to find Cumberland County data, but we have 4 townships in Franklin County as well. So we want to make sure they're merged in, and also finding it when we have townships that are split in library service areas like Penn Township. We have to, it's already done for us here. They already had that split in these reports. So if he can run that again for us for 2020, we'll have 2000, 2010, and 2020 data. So we can have 20 years of comparison, which I think will be very helpful. And then lastly, to talk about our school partnerships, Sue Erdman is enthusiastically running this group, and she has recruited it. We have a couple of community members on that group as well who are involved in schools, and children's librarians is another group that's been introduced to that group, to their meetings. All of these groups, by the way, on the backside are meeting at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, and of course work groups in between. But they started by, I didn't mention that the community data group, they also did a survey of, we surveyed libraries to see how they were using data and how they feel they might use data in the future to help us identify things. We did the same thing with the school group. What are you currently doing with school partnerships? What do you want to be doing? We gave some ideas of things, on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to embrace this as a partnership? So we did some surveys with them. We worked with the GIS department, and they provided us one of the things we realized we didn't really know was when we look at that county map with township lines, we look at that county map with the library service area lines, we don't have a map with the school district line. So we don't know how those things overlay. And so they were able to help us with that. And that gave them a really clear picture of where we have crossover with our schools and where our libraries need to partner with each other instead of competing with each other. So that was very helpful. And now those libraries are getting together and kind of planning what their approaches to different school districts are going to be. So we also compiled a list of school district contacts. That really involved a lot from the children's librarians and the directors going out and finding who are the key people we can contact in each school district and in individual schools. And then just some results of this that we've already seen. One of the results we saw was the West Shore School District contacted me about getting Overdrive e-materials through Sora to all their students. The trickiest of all, we have it in 3 other schools that I know of, but this was the trickiest one because it does involve York County, and so we had to, decide if we were or were not going to allow them. And we decided to do that. We looked at the numbers and said it seems fair to do that because York County School District York County Library System does not have this service. So
we still have that, or the New Cumberland Library, for instance, they still have that arrangement by which York County residents are eligible for membership.
Oh, yes,
there.
yes.
Okay, so we're already doing some. cross.
Yeah. That's exactly how I looked at it. And it's not a service that costs us any additional money. So we only really Canopy's the only thing we have is pay to play. And so we don't allow anyone outside Cumberland County to use that. One other thing, we spend a lot of time with some other libraries that do something that they refer to it as an already access model in schools, where you partner with a school and they can give you essentially their entire student database, and you translate that into library card access. Most of them do it through their school ID. So they use their school ID and they can access library services online. So all of our databases right now, if you go to use them, you have to have a library card, and they would not need that. They could use their school ID, but they'd be identified as a card holder in our database. And that's a pretty, I say easy, I don't have to do the programming, but it's a pretty easy thing you can do with scripting to pull them in. And so we've met with some library systems that do this and are trying to see how we can implement that here. We have also been working on a new element to our website that will be a school services page. We have 3 forms for educators. I wrote them down here or there, but they're for service requests, things like books that they'd like to see in our collection, if they'd like us to come out and do a presentation at their schools, and if they have the third one is an assignment alert form. So if they have a special assignment and they have very specific, they have specifications that they've given their students, we'll know those specifications in advance, so we can help with homework requests. So we're working on that. And then also the last thing is a toolkit for school visits. So at our last meeting, we were presented with a spreadsheet that had all the elements that we would need to put together for a toolkit for school visits. And we're talking about a physical toolkit, that this would be something that they could pick up the crate and go do their school visits. So that's where we are so far on these. I don't know if you have questions on these for me or for Jeff. He's also been highly involved in all these.
One question I have is, refresh my memory on this. These goals, where did these come from?
Well, they're based, I mean, they came from the library system. We brought them to you to approve, but they are based on things from our strategic plan.
Okay, so it's part of the strategic planning process.
Yeah, we went through the strategic planning process last year, and also in preparation for the, not for your Recovery Act grant so much, but the state has some Pennsylvania Department of Education had some Recovery Act money as well. And so we were prioritizing things in that process, and we would pull out say, well, this would make a really good conditional grant instead of a Recovery Act grant. And so that's where this happens.
I asked because personally, I think these are really good. One of the discussions I had frequently with your predecessor was, especially whenever the proposals were brought forward for a library tax increase, the question that I always heard from at least some members of the public was the library, I don't use the library, or the library isn't relevant anymore because of the internet and things like that. You've heard all of those things. So, and to me, the chief word's always been relevancy. We have to become relevant again to a segment of the population, and not just be where, not my opinion, but as some people characterize to me, that's where the old people go to read magazines.
Right.
So, and the feeling being that it's sort of a very small segment that a lot of people were paying for. Now, there's plenty of programs where that occurs, of course. So, but the discussion I frequently have had was the need to increase our library system's relevancy to the average citizen. So, and not just to be seen as a niche service for a niche audience. So, and I think these really, a lot of those discussion points that we've had in the past, so they address these very, very nicely. Obviously, some of these are very timely. The office productivity, we talk about shared services efficiency, cybersecurity, obviously extremely timely. So the partnerships is particularly interesting. I really find that meaningful to the relevancy question, because ultimately we have to do more for more people to be relevant. So, and this really opens the door to a lot of potential uses that I think maybe the old silo definitions failed to take into account. So I'm really pleased to see that, and you've got some excellent examples there. This has been well thought through. The community data is obviously, extremely important, because what was good yesterday is not necessarily good today, and certainly not going to be good for tomorrow. So we need to be forward looking at that. Consensus data can be very useful. It can be hard to interpret sometimes. So
Yeah,
my question on that is, do we still have the futuring panel, and are they involved in this? Because that would be the natural place to nest some of this data to identify future needs. You had mentioned about using this data to identify what you want to be doing in the future. So
yeah.
I hope that panel still exists and that they're tied into this
They have really not, we had the futures group was part of our,
plan.
for our strategic planning.
Okay,
We
yeah,
had members of the futures group on that. But really with the pandemic that
of course, yeah.
they kind of fell apart. We had a meeting in February of 2020, and that was the last time that group has met. But we did pull them then into the strategic planning process.
That's a natural
And,
fit. I would urge you to consider.
It's in, and that's part of our
Keeping them-
strategic plan actually
Yeah.
is to
You want to keep them in
get that
panel,
group back.
use them as your natural element to
Yeah.
look at the data, help you process the data, and bring in whatever other resources they're looking at of outbound information to get outside of the siloing that happens to all organizations. So very good. Schools, I mean, we had that discussion before about how there's not necessarily a duplication, but they're very similar missions in a lot of ways, and it just seemed to be lost opportunities. This looks very promising. I'm sure there's a lot of ideas on directions this could go. So I think this squares very nicely with keeping a progressive outlook for a very forward-looking library system, and really is going to address a lot of the underlying issue of having meaning for the larger community, or community changing. So I always said we need to stop just thinking of it as being a barn for books.
Yeah.
And be more of libraries need to think of themselves as a knowledge marketplace or a community resource facility. So the partnerships seem to really address that. So I like this a lot. So I appreciate the reporting out.
And
Come a
the
long way.
leaders of these groups are extremely passionate about what they're doing. Their team members are enthusiastic. Sometimes we have to rein things in. We get a little too many ideas, and we have to bring it back. But
To be successful, you need that enthusiasm. You have doers. So you gotta have the thinkers and doers. Sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're not. They're not, but it sounds like you got a good basis to launch from. So we'll be watching with continued interest.
Okay, thank you. I'll be back in the third quarter.
That was Vince, any questions?
Yeah, Karen, I wonder if schools, but this.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that with the Sora. Oh, Sora. Sora is, if you're familiar with the Overdrive ebook platform, so people can go to our website, sign up with their library card. They can access ebooks that are downloadable. The best way to do that's the Libby app. So Overdrive's the platform. There's an app called Libby. You can download ebooks and e-audiobooks to that platform and borrow them. And you borrow them like a library book. They disappear after whatever the time period is, 2 or 3 weeks. So Sora is just like Libby, only made for schools. And schools purchase this from Overdrive. And then because we signed a partnership agreement, they get access to our books. So it's just seamless. So they don't have to go through the library. Any child in that school, whether they have a library card or not, can access our ebooks. But that's when I was talking about the downloading the entire school database. If we could ever do something like that, or upload it, I guess is what we're really doing. That would give them access to all of our online resources. Sora only gives them the ebooks. Sora can also be used and schools can do a lot with it. They can, in a classroom, they can assign reading, they can monitor reading, they can set up a book list that this is what stop the summer slide. We want you to read these 10 books. So there are a lot of opportunities that schools have with the Sora app, but they don't have to purchase the books themselves. They get them through public library. And they do have access to a portion of the materials purchased by the Dauphin County Library System as well. So that's nice. It enhances our collection. But nobody in Dauphin County is doing this as far as last I checked. So it's Cumberland's the only one in the area that's using it.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Okay.
Okay, Jeff, anything you want to weigh in on? Anything we
Nope,
missed?
she did a great job.
Most does. Okay. Thank you. Thank you both for being here.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, but then we'll move on to item 5, which is our catch-all category for other business. Do you have anything additional to come before the staff? Nothing. Okay, if that's the case, entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Stand adjourned. Thank you all for being here today.
I